the second episode of our brand new series, Women in Finance, Fun House Edition, where we speak to women who are not only capable of managing their own money, they are also managing yours. Here with me today is Nicole Tan, who is Head of Institutional Sales at CSOP Asset Management. Hi, Nicole.
Hi.
Alright, so before we get into our topic for today, right, maybe let us know a little bit about yourself. So why did you choose to work in finance?
Well, since I was in school, I've always been very intrigued with the financial sector because it is the engine that drives the economy. It has a big impact on the economy. It ensures efficient allocation of resources, and also it's a very dynamic and challenging environment. And anyone who's working in finance, you constantly have to be thinking on your feet. You have to adapt fast to changing economic and macro conditions. So that all presents like a certain sort of excitement for me. And of course, I also like numbers. I like crunching numbers, doing data analysis. And in finance, you have the opportunity to do all that. And of course, last but not least, the monetary rewards, right? And we all admit it that finance sector actually does pay a little bit better than a lot of other sectors. So so that's really
some very practical reasons.
Yes.
So your first job was already, you already took your first step into the finance industry when you started working, is it? It was something you always wanted to do?
Yeah, actually my very first job was with the Stock Exchange of Singapore. Before it was a listed company. Yeah, I was there for about 3 years, and then after that I sort of went into the action side where I get involved in dealing, in selling, and a whole host of other things.
Right, we are also going to get into that right now actually. I'm going to ask you, what does your job entail? So what do you do currently?
Right now at CSOP, I'm responsible for institutional sales distribution, and that is to offer our range of products across both Singapore and Hong Kong to a whole host of institutional clients in Singapore and Southeast Asia. And by institution, we'll be looking at things like your sovereign wealth funds, insurance companies, family offices, university endowment funds, and corporates. Yeah. So.
Wow, so that was a long list, a long list of things.
Yes.
Right. Okay, so we are going to go into the topic of the day properly, which is on women in finance. So of course, I'm going to ask you about the stereotypes of women. So any thoughts on that? Do you think that there are certain characteristics that women have that allow them to maybe become better investors than men, or maybe they are better decision makers? Do you believe in that?
I don't. I feel at the end of the day, good investment decisions are driven by a lot more factors rather than gender inclinations. So, your background, your cultural influences, your education, and basically your experiences, who you grew up with, who you are with now, and also your personality traits, like your ability to tolerate risk, and your adaptability to environments and all that. So I think it's very general to say women are better than men because they are more detail-oriented or more organized. And you can probably find men who are also detail-oriented and organized. So I wouldn't attribute it to gender-driven factors. I'll say you should look at it from more an individual perspective.
That's fair, right? But don't you agree that in the finance industry, don't you realize that there's more men than women?
Yes, that I don't disagree, and I think one of the key reasons could be the demanding, role of finance, because in terms of time, in terms of pressure, it's very demanding on an individual. So for individuals who need to strike better work-life balances, they may find it challenging to manage that in a role in finance, and especially for women because of traditional gender roles and societal expectations. I think there's more emphasis placed on women to take up more caregiving responsibilities. So as a result, you may find that women may find it challenging to maintain longer career prospects in the financial sector. And of course, I don't dispute that there could be unconscious biases in HR policies and promotion that limits the opportunities for women as well. So in that sense, yes, I agree that you probably see slightly less females than males in finance.
Right, okay, but you have been in the industry for really long, right?
27 years.
27 years. So in these 27 years, I mean, you mentioned that it was, kind of smooth sailing generally, but do you have any biggest challenge that you've experienced? Any kind of challenge that you faced during your 27 years?
I think for me, the challenge is not so much because of my gender, but more due to the demands of the role itself. Because to be successful in a role in finance, it requires a lot of time, a lot of commitment, right, to the job. And if one is not careful, the job can literally eat you up. And that was something that I find that a challenge to manage that work-life balance. And it took me a while to realize that. But when I realized that, then I decided to take a career break. It was more like I felt I wanted to spend time, say, with my dad, with, the rest of my family members. So it wasn't due to any gender or stereotypical kind of pressure.
Was the role that you took up after your break different from what you were doing previously?
Yeah, it's slightly different because previously I was in a bank and now I'm in an asset management house. So of course, asset management it's more about, it's more AUM driven, it's long term, and in that sense, the pace is more measured. Whereas banks is very transaction driven. So you are constantly on your feet thinking about where you're going to print your next dollar kind of thing. I mean, they have different pressures, but in that sense, I think the asset management type of environment suits me better in my, in this current phase of my life. Yes.
Okay. Any kind of investment lessons that you think you have learned, during your course of working in the finance industry?
I think the one key lesson I'd say is, to always maintain a diversified portfolio. And by diversification, it's not just about asset allocation, it's also about diversifying your risk tolerance and your time horizon. So take for example, last year with the Credit Suisse AT1 issue, if you weren't diversified and you just have a fixed income portfolio, you'll be quite badly affected. But if you have other asset classes and also maybe some shorter term T-bills and all that, that would probably help to stave off some of that downside pressure. So it's always good to maintain a slightly more diversified portfolio. Yeah.
So do you have any tips for for our viewers in this current economy?
I think a couple of things. One is to always stay vigilant, keep track of current news flow, especially with regards to macro updates, especially what the Fed Reserve is doing, what the PBOC is doing, because right now macro drives everything, interest rates drive, it's sort of the basis on which a lot of things move. So I think we should keep ourselves abreast of a lot of all this data, be it employment data, GDP, or Fed interest rate decisions and all that. So outside of that, the other thing to think about is to not leverage too much, to reduce your leverage, because especially in current high interest rate environment, right, it's good to not take unnecessary leverage. And in that respect also, I think one needs to check on your spending. We need to spend within our means and not overspend. And in relation to that, it's good to also maintain sort of what I would call an emergency fund, where you save about 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses for rainy days, because you never know, right? Tomorrow you could be out of a job and you will need that liquidity. So make sure you maintain an emergency fund in a highly liquid and accessible account. Yeah, and lastly, maintain a diversified investment portfolio. Yeah.
Your main tip.
Yes.
Have a diversified portfolio.
Yes, yes.
Okay, and that nicely concludes our interview. Thank you, Nicole, for coming down today, and thank you to you as well, the viewers, for tuning in to this episode.
Thank you, Shan.
Thank you.